Imagine standing in a frozen wilderness, snow piling high, wind howling like a living thing, and no fire to chase away the cold. No matches, no lighter, no spark. For most of us, that sounds like a nightmare. But for generations of Native American communities, it was a challenge they mastered with calm precision. While others saw the cold as an enemy, they treated it as a teacher. They understood how the land itself could be turned into a source of warmth. The snow wasn't just a blanket of frost, it was insulation. The earth wasn't frozen solid. It held steady heat below the surface. Even the air, if controlled through the right design, could trap warmth like an invisible shield. They learned to stay warm without a single flame, through shelter, layering, movement, and a deep awareness of how to use what nature provided. A pit house half buried in the ground, a dome of snow packed tight against wind, or animal hides layered with moss and bark. Each design proved that comfort didn't come from technology, but from understanding. This wasn't magic, it was engineering born from observation. They could turn a landscape most would fear into one that sustained them, even through blizzards. Today, we rely on heaters, furnaces, and endless fuel to fight the cold. But the people who came before us did more with less, and they did it beautifully. In this episode, we uncover how Native Americans survived brutal winters without fire, through shelters that breathed, diets that fueled, and techniques that redefined survival itself. Subscribe now, because every day we bring history back to life. Imagine waking up to a world buried in white, snow stretching to the horizon, air so cold it bites your lungs, and silence so deep it hums. For most people, the first instinct would be simple: build a fire. But there were times when that wasn't possible. When wood was soaked, winds were too fierce, or fuel simply didn't exist. Yet Native American communities still stayed warm, calm, and alive. This was the fireless paradox: warmth without flame. To modern minds, that sounds impossible. But the answer wasn't brute strength or luck. It was knowledge. Generations observed how heat moved, how it rose, sank, and hid within the earth. They learned that warmth wasn't always something to create. Sometimes it was something to keep. In the far north, some families carved homes from snow itself. In the plains and plateaus, people built lodges sunk into the ground, where the soil's steady temperature kept the cold at bay. Even their clothing, bedding, and sleeping arrangements were part of the same design. Systems for retaining heat rather than producing it. They didn't panic when flames failed. They adapted. Their survival didn't rely on constant consumption. It relied on understanding the quiet science of insulation, reflection, and body heat. Fire was useful, yes, but it wasn't the only source of life. The fireless paradox reveals something remarkable: that true warmth doesn't always glow or flicker. Sometimes it lives in the way people use their surroundings, the patience to observe, the skill to build, and the courage to trust the land itself. For the native peoples of the North and Plains, winter wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to prove that survival could be silent, steady, and fireless. The greatest warmth, it turned out, didn't come from fire. It came from knowing how to build with nature itself. Across the continent, Native Americans mastered the use of earth, snow, and air to create shelters that trapped and recycled heat. Their homes were living systems, shaped by temperature, wind, and terrain, and every curve, every layer, served a purpose. In the north, snow shelters like quinjees and snow caves were feats of physics. Snow, though cold to the touch, trapped air inside its tiny crystals, forming an incredible insulator. By hollowing out a packed mound, they created a microclimate where body heat alone could lift the temperature from freezing to near comfort. Walls reflected warmth inward, while tunnels were dug low to keep frigid air from flowing in. Further south, people turned to the ground. Earth lodges and pit houses used the planet's steady underground temperature to their advantage. Partly buried beneath soil, they stayed warm in winter and cool in summer, a perfect natural regulator. The thick earthen walls absorbed and stored heat, while a central fire pit or even just body warmth maintained a stable interior climate. Even the simplest shelters, wickiups and lean-tos, followed the same logic. Moss, bark, and layered hides created air pockets that held heat, while angled roofs deflected the wind. Some builders used reeds and thatch woven so tightly they repelled snow and rain alike. Nature became the furnace. The soil, snow, and structure did the work of fire, holding warmth where others would have let it escape. These weren't crude huts. They were thermal machines, engineered by observation. For the native builders of old, survival was never about endurance alone. It was about mastery of the elements, crafted one shelter at a time. Even without flame or fuel, warmth could still be made. Not from wood or spark, but from the body itself. Native American communities developed techniques so efficient that the cold became manageable, even in the harshest blizzards. They turned movement, clothing, and cooperation into tools of heat generation, a science of survival hidden in plain sight. Clothing was the first defense. Instead of bulky layers, they used smart layering. Furs, hides, and woven fibers arranged to trap air close to the skin. The innermost layer stayed dry, the middle insulated, and the outer shielded against wind and snow. Hides were smoked and softened, retaining oils that made them naturally water-resistant. The result was clothing that breathed, adapted, and kept the body's warmth sealed inside. Then came movement. They understood that stillness was the enemy of heat. In freezing conditions, they used deliberate activity, short bursts of work, rhythmic motion, or even controlled breathing to keep circulation steady. Hunters and travelers knew how to manage exertion carefully, staying warm without sweating, since moisture could freeze and steal heat away. At night, warmth came through connection. Families and travelers slept close, often under shared coverings, conserving body heat in enclosed spaces. In larger shelters, animal hides or mats were laid across the ground to block cold from the soil, while snow or earth walls surrounded sleeping areas for insulation. It wasn't about comfort, it was about precision. They knew when to move, when to rest, and how to conserve energy so heat wasn't lost faster than it could be made. Fire could be unpredictable, but the body was constant, and when used wisely, it became the most reliable source of warmth in the frozen world. Fire warms from the outside, but real survival begins within. Native Americans knew that the body itself could be a furnace, and the food that fueled it was every bit as important as shelter or clothing. During long winters, when game was scarce and temperatures unforgiving, they turned nutrition into a tool for endurance. Their diets were built around calorie-dense, slow-burning foods that sustained energy for hours. Pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries, was one of the most efficient sources of fuel ever created. It was light to carry, required no cooking, and could keep a traveler strong for days. The fat provided warmth through metabolism, while the protein kept muscles from tiring in the cold. Roots and preserved vegetables played their part too. Ground tubers, cattail roots, and dried corn supplied carbohydrates for steady energy. Dried fruits added natural sugars that sparked warmth and focus during frigid mornings. Nothing went unused. Every scrap of preserved food held purpose. Hydration mattered just as much. Warm herbal infusions and broths helped regulate body temperature and kept blood flowing in freezing air. Simple teas made from pine needles, cedar, or bark not only warmed the core, but replenished vital nutrients lost to the cold. Drinking cold water, they understood, could drain body heat, so they adapted, turning every sip into a small act of survival. Even their eating patterns followed strategy. Smaller, frequent meals instead of large feasts, keeping metabolism active and warmth steady. Through centuries of experience, they learned what modern science confirms. Food isn't just fuel, it's heat. By mastering diet and hydration, Native Americans turned every bite, every drink, into an invisible fire that burned from within. To the people who lived close to the land, winter wasn't a season to fight. It was a rhythm to follow. They didn't see the cold as an intruder, but as part of the cycle that shaped life itself. This mindset changed everything about how they approached survival. Instead of resisting nature, they worked in step with it. Before the first frost arrived, preparations began. Shelters were sealed, supplies stored, and every task followed the pattern of the weather. They knew when the snow would come, how the wind would shift, and where warmth could still be found. This understanding didn't come from superstition. It came from observation. Every change in air, light, and sound carried information. In deep winter, they slowed their pace deliberately. Activity moved inward, from hunting wide-open spaces to working in the protection of lodges or snow shelters. Energy conservation was a strategy, not a luxury. People ate differently, moved differently, and slept in patterns that mirrored the daylight. By syncing with nature's slower tempo, they avoided exhaustion and kept strength steady through months of cold. Even their emotional approach mattered. Fear wastes energy. Calm preserves it. Communities that trusted their preparation stayed composed in conditions that would send others into panic. This quiet confidence became its own kind of warmth. The knowledge that the land could still provide if treated with respect and awareness. In every action, from choosing a campsite to crafting a tool, there was a balance between effort and patience. The cold wasn't their enemy. It was their instructor. And through learning its rhythm, Native Americans found something modern life often forgets. Survival isn't about conquering nature. It's about keeping pace with it. When winter came, every stitch, seam, and layer mattered. Clothing wasn't decoration. It was survival. Long before synthetic fabrics and modern insulation, Native American communities engineered garments that performed as precisely as any modern cold-weather gear, using only what the land provided. Each region had its own system, shaped by climate. In the north, hunters and travelers relied on animal hides and furs. Elk, bison, rabbit, or caribou layered in ways that trapped heat while allowing air to circulate. The soft inner side faced the body to retain warmth, while the fur side repelled snow and wind. Some coats were even reversed in extreme weather, using the fur inward for insulation or outward to deflect cold. Further south, people adapted lighter solutions. Plant fibers, woven bark, and cattail fluff created breathable yet insulating garments for milder winters. Grass and moss were added inside moccasins to wick moisture and cushion against frost. Every piece had a reason. No stitch was random, no material wasted. They mastered layering long before it became an outdoor survival rule. Multiple thin layers performed better than one thick coat, keeping air trapped between them like invisible walls of insulation. Hoods, leggings, and mittens were fitted to minimize heat loss without restricting movement, proof of a deep understanding of human physiology and the elements. Clothing wasn't separate from the environment. It was an extension of it. Every garment connected body, movement, and weather into a seamless system of warmth. In a world without zippers or factory-made fibers, they achieved what we now call thermal regulation, naturally, effectively, and beautifully. Their clothing didn't just protect against the cold. It turned adaptation into art. proving that survival can be engineered with creativity, precision, and respect for the materials at hand. Before a single wall was built or a single hide was stretched, native builders made the most crucial decision of all: where to build. Placement was everything. A well-chosen site could mean the difference between freezing and comfort, between struggle and ease. They read the land like a map of survival. A shelter wasn't dropped at random. It was positioned with precision. In the northern plains, homes were placed along southern slopes, catching the low winter sun while staying shielded from the harsh northern wind. Trees and natural ridges acted as barriers, breaking gusts before they reached camp. Valleys were avoided, not because they lacked space, but because cold air sank and pooled there at night, like invisible water. Near forests, builders took advantage of nature's own insulation. Dense trees created a buffer that trapped warmth and muffled the wind. In open country, they dug slightly into the ground, not deep enough to flood, but low enough to harness the Earth's steady temperature beneath the frost. Even entrance direction mattered. Doorways faced away from prevailing winds and toward the sunrise, allowing light and warmth to enter each morning. Snow shelters and pit houses often had narrow, low entrances that forced cold air to settle away from sleeping areas. Every decision, from the slope of the roof to the curve of a doorway, flowed from that first choice of placement. The environment itself became part of the design, saving energy before any structure existed. Modern architecture still follows these same principles: southern exposure, windbreaks, natural shading, ideas native builders perfected centuries ago. Their genius began long before walls went up. It began in how they saw the land. Warmth, for them, started not with fire, but with foresight. For the people who lived close to the land, warmth was as much a mindset as it was a skill. The cold didn't only test the body, it tested patience, awareness, and discipline. Those who survived weren't just strong, they were composed. They understood that panic wastes energy and fear burns faster than fire. To them, the cold wasn't a curse, it was a teacher. From a young age, winter was part of life's lessons. Children learned to stay calm in snowstorms, to read the color of clouds, and to move efficiently without exhausting themselves. They were taught that endurance wasn't about fighting the cold, it was about managing it. Every breath, every motion had a rhythm meant to preserve strength. Even hunters in sub-zero temperatures approached the cold with respect, not resistance. They moved steadily, conserving heat through controlled breathing and deliberate pacing. They wrapped their faces in furs to trap moisture and exhaled slowly to avoid freezing air in their lungs. Through experience, they trained their bodies to generate and retain warmth naturally, a quiet mastery of both mind and form. Communities understood the psychological side of survival too. Storytelling, work, and companionship kept morale steady through the darkest months. In shared spaces, laughter and conversation filled the silence, replacing isolation with connection. The cold could surround them, but it couldn't consume them. This resilience came from a lifetime of coexistence with the elements. The people didn't see winter as punishment, but as proof, a reminder of what awareness, cooperation, and patience could accomplish. In the end, warmth wasn't just physical. It was composure under pressure, focus under hardship, and balance under threat. That mindset made them not just survivors of the cold, but masters of it. In today's world, survival often begins with convenience: a lighter, a heater, a ready-made solution. But the fireless techniques of Native Americans reveal something modern life often overlooks. True preparedness isn't about tools, it's about understanding. Their methods hold lessons that reach far beyond history, especially for anyone who ventures into the wild or faces the unexpected. Shelter first, not fire. That's the rule they lived by. Modern survivalists now echo the same wisdom. Heat loss happens faster through exposure than through hunger or thirst. And even the smallest windbreak or snow shelter can mean the difference between life and death. Learning to build with what's available, snow, soil, branches, or grass, remains one of the most valuable skills in wilderness survival. Their approach to clothing and insulation also stands as timeless guidance. Layering materials that trap air, keeping dry, and covering the head and hands were simple but life-saving habits. The same principles guide mountaineers and explorers today. Technology has changed, but the logic hasn't. Movement, nutrition, and mindset complete the triad of lessons. Generating body heat through controlled activity, eating for energy instead of comfort, and staying calm enough to think clearly under pressure. These ideas still form the backbone of modern survival training. And beyond physical techniques lies something even greater: adaptability. The ability to read the land, to observe instead of react, to build rather than burn. That's what defined their success. The old ways weren't primitive, they were efficient. In a world growing ever more dependent on technology, their fireless warmth stands as proof that survival begins not with what we carry, but with what we know, and how deeply we're willing to connect with the world around us. When you trace the story of Native American survival through winter's harshest trials, one truth becomes clear. They didn't conquer nature, they cooperated with it. Every shelter, every movement, every small act of preservation reflected an understanding that the environment wasn't the enemy, it was the partner. Their fireless warmth wasn't a miracle, it was method. It was the product of centuries spent learning how cold behaves, how wind moves, and how snow and soil can protect instead of destroy. They saw resources where others saw danger: insulation in moss, comfort in earth, safety in design. That awareness turned the coldest places on the continent into homes, not battlegrounds. This legacy of adaptation still matters today. When modern life faces challenges, climate shifts, resource scarcity, or simply the loss of connection to the natural world, their lessons feel more urgent than ever. They remind us that resilience isn't about endless consumption, but about balance. The strength of their approach lies in simplicity, knowing how to survive with what's near, not with what's bought. From frozen plains to snow-dusted forests, the people who lived without fire didn't just endure winter. They learned to belong within it. Their techniques continue to inspire architects, survivalists, and environmentalists searching for sustainable answers. Every earth lodge, every fur-lined garment, every snow-packed shelter still whispers the same message. Progress doesn't mean abandoning the old ways. Sometimes the most advanced ideas are the ones already proven by time. The story of fireless warmth is more than survival. It's about awareness, ingenuity, and the quiet intelligence that comes from truly knowing your world. That's the legacy they left behind. Not tools, not flames, but a way of thinking that never freezes. As the last snow falls and the cold settles in, we're left with a realization that changes how we see survival itself. The people who lived in this land before us didn't just make it through winter. They mastered it. They proved that warmth doesn't always need a flame, and that real comfort can be built from knowledge, patience, and respect for the world around you. In the silence of frozen nights, they stayed warm through what they built, what they wore, what they ate, and how they thought. Every shelter, every garment, every movement was part of a system that worked with the earth instead of against it. Where most of us would reach for matches or electricity, they relied on design and awareness. Lessons so advanced they're still influencing modern engineering and sustainable living today. Their homes were not temporary solutions, they were long-term answers. Efficient, elegant, and deeply connected to the rhythm of nature. They didn't try to overpower the cold. They listened to it, studied it, and adapted until even the harshest winter became livable. And maybe that's what makes their story powerful today. In a time when we depend on machines for warmth and comfort, they remind us that the greatest survival tool isn't something we build. It's the understanding we carry. From fireless shelters to the foods that fueled endurance, their ingenuity shines brighter than any flame. It's a legacy of awareness, creativity, and balance, the kind of knowledge the modern world could use more of. If these stories make you see history not as distant, but alive, still teaching, still relevant, then subscribe now.